Hey guys, tonight we trudge into the pre-dawn chill, the kind of cold that makes your eyelashes frost over before your first sip of coffee. You probably won't survive this if you're imagining a comfy hotel bed. Frontier mail riders didn't exactly have memory foam or heated blankets. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious if you're waking up with me or settling down for a late night listen. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first light is barely brushing the horizon as you swing your legs over the side of the bedroll, legs stiff, back tight from the uneven ground beneath your thin mattress of pine boughs and horsehair. The air smells faintly of damp wool and last night's lantern smoke, and you breathe it in like a bitter tonic that somehow wakes you better than any coffee. Frontier riders had a rhythm here, rising before the sun, tending the horses, shaking out the blankets, and quietly checking the mail pouches. It's a choreography honed by necessity. Drop a letter, and you might be explaining it to the sheriff, or worse, to the frost itself. Historians still argue whether some riders actually used short morning calisthenics or simply endured the ache, but either way, it kept the blood moving. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling the crunch of frost beneath your fingertips. Some riders carried miniature journals to record sightings, wolves, coyotes, or the occasional lost prospector, but also practical notes: which river crossings froze first, which grass patches offered the most traction. You roll the journal under your arm as you check the horse. The animal snorts, steam rising from its nostrils, a living thermometer against the cold. Fringe sources claim some riders whispered to their horses a kind of morning mantra, believing it encouraged warmth or luck. Modern science hasn't exactly proven this, but it's charming to imagine a half-frozen rider and horse exchanging small talk about frostbite. Packing is simple but ritualized. You tuck gloves into boot tops, smooth out the saddle blankets, and make sure your knife is within reach. The cold sharpens your senses. Every snap of twig or distant howl echoes loudly in the morning hush. The lantern you stashed under the horse's neck is ready. Its flame will be your companion until the sun finally peaks above the ridge. You rub your hands together, inhale the earthy perfume of dew and pine, and notice your toes slowly thaw inside wool socks layered over leather boots. By the time you swing into the saddle, your body has adjusted to the rhythm. You trudge along rutted trails, the mailbag bouncing against your back, your horse's hooves crunching the frozen dirt. A minor debate among historians centers on whether riders actually sang softly to themselves to combat the pre-dawn chill. Some diaries claim it, others deny it, but for you, any noise seems welcome. The first stretch is quiet, almost sacred. You notice the birds waking, the way frost coats spiderwebs like sugar crystals, the soft metallic clink of buckles as your horse stretches. A light joke enters your head, partly to distract from the numbness. Who knew frostbite could double as personal acupuncture? You smirk but keep moving, remembering the crude but effective remedies carried in the satchel: dried herbs, a pinch of lard, and an oddly aromatic mix of ground spices for warmth. There's an undeniable art to this routine: the precise angle you swing your leg over the saddle, the way you balance on thin ice patches, the subtle nudges to keep your horse alert but calm. Some riders swore by leaving a tiny bit of mail pouch open to let spirits pass through, a practice still debated among historians, though today it just seems like a quirky superstition. By the time the sun touches the treetops, your muscles are awake, your mind alert, and your breath has turned to mist in the cold air. You glance down at your bedroll, now rolled and stowed neatly behind the saddle, and feel the satisfaction of a ritual completed. The dawn patrol survived, the frost managed, the mail safe. A stray thought flits across your mind. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen some frontier riders swore by? Somehow that ridiculous detail feels oddly connected to the precision and patience required for this morning. You pat the horse, adjust the straps, and continue along the path, knowing that the first stretch of the day has been conquered.
You slide off the saddle, boots crunching against frost-hardened soil, and kneel beside your bedroll to pack for the day. The ritual of packing is a quiet art. Not too tight, not too loose, but with each item placed exactly where you can reach it without fumbling in cold fingers. You start with the small essentials: a handkerchief, a pocket-sized compass, a tangle of spare twine. Frontier mail riders carried just enough to survive the night and the morning stretch. Historians still argue whether some carried extra comfort items purely for morale or superstition. You tuck your miniature journal into the inner fold of the blankets, knowing the horse might nudge it loose if you're not careful. Next comes the more curious stuff: a few dried herbs that smell faintly of lavender and sage, meant to ward off insects, or so the lore goes. Fringe accounts suggest some writers even sprinkled a tiny pinch of powdered charcoal on their bedroll to absorb moisture, a trick that supposedly kept frost from clinging to wool. You shake your head at the thought. Charcoal and frost? Really? But the ritual persists, and you follow it anyway. There's a comforting rhythm to the movements: fold, tuck, roll, snap straps, repeat. You move on to the larger items: a thick wool blanket folded precisely so that one corner drapes over the edges like a protective shield. Animal hides, often goat or deer, provide a second insulating layer. Some writers carried thin sheets of tanned bison leather to line the interior of the bedroll, adding warmth without bulk. You layer carefully, testing the weight by lifting and letting the roll settle naturally on the ground. The smell of dried leather and earthy wool rises with the cold air, a scent that seems odd to modern noses, but is deeply familiar to anyone who spent a night on the frontier. One of your hands grazes the leather pouch that contains the day's mail: letters, small parcels, folded papers tied with string. Every item has a story, every story a potential consequence if mishandled. Fringe accounts claim that writers sometimes tied small charms or coins to the pouches for luck, though historians still debate whether this was common practice or merely isolated superstition. You double-check the knots, feeling the slight roughness of rope against fingertips, and imagining the tiny jingling of coins hidden inside, like a secret musical accompaniment to your route. With the bulk packed, you fasten straps and snap buckles. The bedroll now resembles a compact cylinder, ready to strap behind the saddle. You pause, noticing the faint aroma of herbs, leather, and smoke lingering in the cold morning air. A minor joke crosses your mind: if only modern backpacks smell this heroic. You give a small chuckle and adjust the blanket that will rest against your back, knowing the comfort of these small rituals will carry you further than any heat-retaining layer alone. The final step is always the trickiest: balancing comfort with accessibility. You test each pocket, every fold, every strap. The knife sits at your thigh, easily drawn, the journal in the inner pouch, the herbs tucked into the top layer. You check the horse, which shifts slightly as if approving your arrangement. Fringe sources suggest some writers whispered to the animals while packing, a superstition to keep the horse calm, or perhaps it was simply a method of passing time while frost hardened beneath your knees. Either way, it works. By now, you're ready to lift the bedroll onto the saddle. It's a skillful motion: tilt, slide, hook straps, cinch tight without crushing anything inside. You step back and admire the neat cylinder, a small fortress of warmth and practicality. A breeze rolls through the trees, and you breathe in the morning air, noticing the frost sparkling like scattered diamonds on leaves and grass. Historians still argue whether the layering methods were universal among writers or a collection of personal hacks, but you know from experience that the system works. You pause to reflect on a slightly ridiculous detail from earlier: that pinch of charcoal powder, now mixed faintly with dew, forming a dark crust along the edges. Somehow it feels like a nod to ingenuity over comfort, a reminder that frontier life demanded creativity even in mundane routines. With a final pat on the bedroll, you mount the horse, feeling the secure balance of a well-packed night bag. Each wear, each fold, each tiny herb tucked in its spot carries a sense of order, safety, and pride. And now, the trail ahead beckons.
The lantern waits, its glass pane frosted lightly with the chill of night. You grasp the handle, feeling the warmth of residual heat from yesterday's ride, and prepare the delicate task of lighting it without sending a plume of smoke or a spark into your hair. Frontier riders treated lanterns like sacred tools. Improper handling could leave you fumbling in darkness, or worse, reveal your position to curious wildlife. Historians still argue whether the modern idea of lantern etiquette truly existed or is simply romanticized in diaries, but you know that centuries of trial and error produced some clever habits worth following. You strike the flint and watch the tiny spark jump, a flicker of life that soon swells into a dancing flame. The smell of burning oil is familiar, comforting even, like a small hearth condensed into a glass cylinder. Fringe accounts suggest that some riders would inscribe tiny symbols onto the lantern housing before use, claiming it would encourage steady light or ward off misfortune. You smirk at the thought while adjusting the wick, thinking, if this works, I'll consider it magic. If it doesn't, it's just smoke. Balancing the lantern requires finesse. You can't hold it too close to the bedroll or risk singeing wool, but too far and the light loses its gentle glow, leaving shadows that play tricks on your eyes. You position it carefully, noting how the small flame illuminates the rough textures of your folded blankets, the glint of metal buckles, and the satchel containing the day's letters. The flickering light casts long, stretching shadows that sway across the frost-dusty ground, creating a theater of silent movement around your campsite. You can almost imagine the letters themselves leaning forward, eager for their journey. Riders developed countless tricks to keep lanterns burning longer. One method involved partially submerging the base in a shallow dish of water, preventing overheating, while another fringe tactic recommended coating the glass with a thin smear of lard to prevent condensation. Historians debate the efficacy of these practices, but you can't deny the ingenuity. They turn a simple light source into a carefully engineered survival tool. The flame is mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and you let yourself linger for a moment, fingers brushing the cool metal frame. A minor chuckle escapes as you recall an old anecdote, a rider who claimed he trained his horse to walk beside him holding a lantern in its mouth. You doubt it actually happened, but the mental image of a lantern-carrying steed amid frost-tipped pines is too good to resist. The practical lesson is clear. Light management can make or break a night's comfort and safety. You adjust the wick again, noticing how the flame strengthens, warm and steady, reflecting gold against the frost. The scent of oil mingles with the herbs tucked into your bedroll, creating an oddly calming aroma. You watch sparks rise from the lantern as the wick settles, tiny sparks performing their silent dance before fading into the night. Fringe sources note that some riders would sprinkle a few grains of salt around the lantern's base, claiming it would prolong the burn. Historians still argue whether this was a common practice or mere superstition. You decide it can't hurt and sprinkle a tiny pinch, laughing softly at the ritual's absurd charm. You move the lantern closer to the bedroll, testing the warmth it casts over your layers. The glow reveals subtle textures, the fur's nap, the woven pattern of wool, and the faint scratches on leather that tell stories of long rides and narrow escapes. A small joke drifts across your mind. Romantic, yes, but also mildly smoky. Still, you feel the reassurance of light in the darkness, the silent companion that keeps both chill and shadow at bay. Finally, you sit back, letting the soft illumination bathe the camp. Every flicker becomes a heartbeat in the night, a rhythm guiding your senses as you plan the next steps of your journey. The lantern is more than a tool. It's a signal, a ritual, a friend. And with the fire steady, the bedroll layered, and the day's mail secured, you feel the quiet satisfaction of mastery, however small, in a world that demands constant adaptation and quiet cunning. You lower yourself onto the bedroll, testing the layered textures you spent the morning perfecting. The first touch of wool is soft, almost reassuring, while the hidden bison hide underneath offers a subtle firmness, a backbone to cradle your tired muscles. You breathe in the faint herbal scent, sage, lavender, and that whisper of powdered charcoal, and feel a surprising warmth radiate from the layers. Frontier riders swore by this combination, claiming it kept frost at bay,
But historians still argue whether the aromatic herbs truly served a functional purpose or were just morale boosters. Either way, they make the ritual of crawling into the bedroll oddly pleasant. Folding your legs carefully, you tuck them beneath the blanket layers like an origami model designed for warmth. A minor breeze sneaks in, teasing the edges of the blankets, so you adjust the top layer just enough to seal the perimeter. Fringe accounts suggest some riders even tucked a tiny pouch of dried flowers near their face, believing the scent could ward off bad dreams or restless spirits. You grin at the idea, half practical, half whimsical, but you place the pouch near your pillow anyway, enjoying the ritualistic charm. The art of layering is surprisingly scientific. The top wool blankets trap heat rising from your body, the hides insulate against cold seeping from the ground, and the herbs add not just scent but moisture absorption, according to some diaries. You smooth each layer with careful attention, noting how each fold adds comfort without creating bulk. A minor joke flits across your mind. I paid for a mattress once, it didn't smell like sage. Yet there's an undeniable satisfaction in the precision, the way your bedroll becomes a personal fortress against frost and fatigue. You notice the subtle creak of the saddle straps under the horse's weight nearby, a gentle reminder that your companion is still awake, still vigilant. Some riders used the horse's body heat to warm the ground near the bedroll, a clever tactic historians debate. Was it widely practiced or just an occasional hack? You nudge your knees against the earth and feel the warmth radiate, faint but noticeable, reminding you that ingenuity often comes from necessity rather than comfort. As darkness blankets the camp, the flickering lantern casts shifting shadows across your carefully arranged layers. You imagine tiny armies of letters and parcels tucked in their pouches, waiting for your journey to resume. Fringe anecdotes describe riders talking to the bundles, wishing them luck on their journey, though historians are divided on whether this was superstition or just an amusing quirk. You whisper a soft goodnight to the mail anyway, and it feels oddly satisfying, like a promise kept. The layers do more than insulate, they provide sensory cues. You feel each texture beneath your fingertips, the smoothness of leather, the rough weave of wool, the soft nap of fur. Every detail adds a sense of order in a chaotic wilderness, a way to assert control in an environment that can turn harsh in moments. You tuck your arms under the top layer, creating a cocoon, and notice the soft hum of the fan or night breeze merging with distant animal calls. A small quip crosses your mind. If medieval feng shui existed, this would be it. Yet beneath the humor is comfort, the undeniable warmth of preparation. Every fold, every layer, every aromatic pouch contributes to a sense of readiness, a quiet victory over the cold night. You shift slightly, letting your body sink into the contours of the bedroll, and notice how the faintly herbal aroma mixes with the lantern's residual warmth to create a cocoon that is both practical and strangely soothing. You pause, letting your thoughts drift to curious historical tidbits. Some riders reportedly tucked notes into their bedding, small poems or reminders, perhaps to maintain morale. Historians still argue whether these were private musings or part of a structured ritual. For you, the presence of even a single note or charm offers a touch of humanity amidst the frost and darkness. You sigh softly, adjusting a corner of the blanket, and settle into the gentle rhythm of layered warmth.
By now, your stomach hums faintly, reminding you that even the most disciplined rider needs sustenance. You reach for a small tin of preserved meat and hardtack, the kind that crunches like old parchment but holds the necessary energy for miles ahead. Frontier riders often favored high-calorie, low-prep foods. They needed fuel, not gourmet dining, but fringe recipes included surprisingly aromatic spice mixes, sometimes just enough to make a cold bite feel almost luxurious. Historians still argue whether these energy hacks were widespread or merely isolated experiments, but they add an intriguing layer to the life of the night traveler. You kneel beside a small, improvised fire pit, careful not to disturb your meticulously packed bedroll or the horse snoozing nearby. The trick is subtle, coaxing heat from a few twigs without attracting unwanted attention from wildlife. The fire crackles faintly, a tiny orchestra of sparks and warmth, illuminating the rough texture of the surrounding frost. You recall that riders sometimes cooked over flat stones, a method that conserved fuel and produced surprisingly even heat. Fringe accounts suggest some used hollowed gourds as makeshift ovens, though historians remain skeptical of their practicality. Still, the notion tickles your imagination. As the first wisps of cooked food reach your nose, you savor the scents: smoky, earthy, a touch of seasoning that seems almost extravagant in the quiet night. You nibble carefully, aware of the delicate balance between eating and staying alert. A soft breeze carries a hint of pine, and you imagine the letters tied in pouches, their tiny journeys just beginning. A minor joke flits across your mind. Who knew frostbite and hardtack could pair so well? You chuckle, crunching the dry morsels, and let the small ritual of a midnight snack anchor you in the present. The fire's warmth extends just enough to melt frost-laced edges of your boots and gloves, adding another layer of comfort. You notice tiny sparks rising, like fleeting stars escaping the hearth, and adjust the bedroll to catch the residual heat. Fringe sources describe riders hanging a small bit of fat or oil near the fire to enhance light and warmth, a tactic historians still debate, but you place a tiny scrap of tallow nearby, enjoying the faint, steady glow. It's a subtle, almost meditative interaction with the elements. While eating, you occasionally glance at the horse, who shifts slightly but remains calm. Horses were partners in these nocturnal adventures, providing heat, transport, and reassurance. Some riders whispered soft songs or recited familiar phrases to keep the animal settled. Historians still argue whether these were superstition or practical training techniques. You murmur a few words, almost conversationally, and the horse nudges you gently, as if acknowledging the gesture. The fire dwindles to a gentle ember, leaving only the faint aroma of cooking and smoke lingering in the air. You tidy the stones and twigs carefully, making sure nothing could smolder and risk a late-night flare-up. Fringe anecdotes tell of riders sprinkling sand over the embers, believing it would absorb residual heat and prevent accidental fires, though modern analysis questions the efficiency of the technique. Still, you indulge the ritual. It adds rhythm, focus, and a subtle sense of control. With the meal finished and embers fading, you crawl back into the layered bedroll, feeling residual warmth from the fire seeping through the blankets. The herbs release a faint, calming scent, mingling with the faint smoke lingering in the cold air. A minor quip drifts across your mind. I came for frostbite, stayed for aromatherapy. Yet beneath the humor lies a true appreciation. This small ritual of cooking and eating quietly in the night, without fanfare, is a frontier luxury. You shift slightly, letting the warmth settle, and notice the quiet. Only the soft huff of your horse, the distant rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of frost settling. The lantern flickers softly, casting a gold glow over your carefully layered bedroll, the blankets, hides, and herbs creating a cocoon of comfort. This is the magic of midnight preparation, the quiet mastery of small actions that sustain life, morale, and a sense of control in a world that offers little of either. Finally, you close your eyes briefly, savoring the satisfaction of a night well managed, the mail secured, the horse calm, the fire extinguished, and the bedroll snug. Historians still debate the efficiency of these methods, the rituals, the fringe practices, but you don't need confirmation. Each step, each minor quirk, each whisper to your horse or herb-filled pouch contributes to survival, warmth, and a rare peace in the cold wilderness. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you realize that for tonight at least, you are ready. You shift slightly, feeling the subtle warmth radiating from your horse as it stands nearby, a quiet, living heater against the night's chill. Frontier riders often relied on this small, natural source of heat, layering their bedrolls to catch any residual warmth the animal's body released. Some riders reportedly pressed the horse's side against the roll for minutes at a time, believing it would transfer just enough heat to make the difference between shivering and dozing. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread tactic or simply isolated anecdotes, but the concept is elegant, a partnership between rider and steed extending beyond mere transportation. You test the horse-harnessed heating hack yourself, draping a corner of your bedroll against the flank of the sleeping animal. The warmth is subtle, a faint echo of muscle and blood, but it seeps through the layers, a gentle comfort that almost feels like a shared secret. Fringe sources describe riders whispering gratitude to the animal in these moments, claiming the horse would return the favor with steadier gait or calmer behavior during the next day's journey. You murmur softly, half in amusement, half in ritual, and adjust the roll to maximize the heat without disturbing the horse. Beyond heat transfer, these tactics were remarkably practical. The horse's body shields the bedroll from wind, adds slight insulation against frost on the ground, and even provides a sense of companionship in otherwise lonely stretches. You tuck your hands beneath the layers, letting your fingers rest near the leather, wool, and fur, feeling the faint warmth move upward. Historians still argue whether riders relied heavily on this method, or if it was simply one of many improvised techniques for cold nights. But in your experience, every degree counts. You notice the faint rhythm of the horse's breathing, a gentle inhale and exhale that harmonizes with your own, creating a subtle, lulling cadence. Some riders claimed that focusing on this shared rhythm could induce deeper rest, a technique still debated among scholars. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound and the residual heat combine into a sensation of security. A minor quip drifts across your mind. Finally, a heat pump I didn't have to buy. The humor lightens the tension, and you shift slightly, settling more fully into the layers. Fringe anecdotes suggest that some riders even created tiny pockets in their bedrolls, specifically to trap the horse's warmth, stitching subtle flaps or folding layers in ways that modern readers might find excessive. Yet the logic is sound. The closer contact with a living heat source allows even a thin wool layer to feel surprisingly cozy. You experiment gently, adjusting folds, noticing how small changes can make the difference between a restless night and one where sleep arrives almost effortlessly. Outside, the wind brushes the trees, and frost glimmers faintly in the lantern's glow. You feel the slight vibration of the horse shifting weight, a reminder that even in stillness, the world moves. You tuck your knees closer, flatten the top layer of wool, and sense the warmth radiating upward, subtle but undeniably present. Fringe sources also claim that riders sometimes used a thin board or cloth between horse and bedroll to prevent damp spots while still capturing heat. Historians debate whether this was common or exceptional, but the creativity speaks volumes. A gentle joke forms in your mind. Who knew my best night's sleep would depend on a four-legged radiator? You laugh softly, careful not to disturb the quiet magic of the moment. The combination of layered bedroll, aromatic herbs, and horse-harnessed heat creates a cocoon that feels deliberate and comforting, a triumph of ingenuity over nature's chill. You adjust the lantern slightly, letting its flicker reinforce the warmth with soft light, and savor the layered sensations: warmth, scent, sound, and a faint sense of control over a wild environment. Finally, you settle fully, letting the horse's steady presence seep into your consciousness. The residual heat moves through the layers of wool and hides, mingling with the subtle aromatic aroma. Fringe or not, the method works. Sleep feels possible here, even in the harsh frontier night. And as you feel your eyes grow heavy, you realize this peculiar partnership of rider, horse, and bedroll may be the most reliable secret to surviving the frost, a secret preserved through centuries of trial, ingenuity, and whispered stories.
The wind picks up, rustling through frost-tipped branches, and you instinctively adjust your bedroll layers, pressing edges against logs and small mounds of earth to block drafts. Weatherproofing was an art every frontier rider mastered, not merely for comfort, but for survival. Some riders propped branches or piled mud strategically to create small windbreaks, while others carved shallow trenches beneath the bedroll to channel moisture away. Historians still argue whether these methods were systematically taught or evolved organically from individual experimentation, but the results speak for themselves. A rider's night could hinge on such subtle measures. You lean against a log, feeling its rough texture through the leather of your gloves, and smooth the top layer of blankets. Fringe accounts describe riders lining their sleeping spot with pine needles or dried grasses, claiming these natural materials both insulated and masked human scent from predators. You tuck a few extra sprigs under the bedroll edges, enjoying the faint crackle as your fingers press them into place. A minor quip flits through your mind. I guess we really did sleep on a forest salad. The humor lingers, even as the cold nips at exposed skin. Rain or frost could strike unpredictably, so improvisation was key. You notice small dips in the earth where water might pool, and reposition your bedroll slightly higher. Fringe sources note that some riders would place a thin layer of birch bark under the hides to repel moisture, a method still debated for effectiveness, but charming in its ingenuity. Historians marvel at the creativity. Every ridge, every hollow, every fold of bark or blanket became a small fortress against the elements. You pat down the bark and adjust the folds, appreciating the tactile assurance of a dry, insulated bed. The horse shifts again, a warm presence beside you. Some riders built tiny wind tunnels using logs and boulders, guiding the air in ways that protected both horse and rider. You mimic this instinctively, placing a nearby stick to block gusts while maintaining easy access to your supplies. Fringe anecdotes claim that certain riders even hung small cloth flags to signal wind direction, though historians debate whether this was common or merely eccentric. Either way, the principle resonates. Attention to detail meant the difference between restless chills and peaceful sleep. You tuck the bedroll edges closer, creating a small pocket that traps your body heat. Layering and positioning become a tactile meditation, each fold purposeful. Fringe sources mention the occasional addition of scented herbs to mask human odor from wolves or coyotes. Whether it worked or not, the effect on your senses is undeniable. The faint aroma of lavender and sage blends with the subtle scent of pine and frost, and you breathe deeply, letting the layered sensory environment lull your body toward rest. A soft joke crosses your mind. I'm basically sleeping in a scented, frost-proof burrito. The image is absurd, yet it captures the essence of frontier ingenuity, combining practicality, comfort, and a hint of whimsy. You adjust the top layer once more, smoothing out wrinkles, and notice how the wind interacts with the small ridge you built. The microclimate feels safer already, and you sense the layers of the bedroll working in harmony with the landscape. You pause, listening to distant animal calls and the soft groan of timber as the wind shifts. Every small adjustment, the branch here, the log there, the precise tuck of blankets, creates a deliberate buffer against the unpredictability outside. Historians still debate whether riders' methods were universally applied or highly individualized, but in this moment, you are living proof of their effectiveness. The chill remains, but it no longer dominates. The frost and gusts now serve as a backdrop for the carefully engineered warmth surrounding you. Finally, you let your hands rest, fingers brushing against the familiar layers of wool, hides, and bark. The subtle scent of herbs mingle with the earthy aroma of the forest floor, while the faint residual warmth from your horse radiates nearby. The layered environment feels like an extension of your body, a fortress against the cold. And as your muscles relax and your breathing slows, you realize that the labor of careful weatherproofing, built over centuries of rider wisdom, has paid off. The night, however wild, is now manageable, even gentle. Even in this quiet, layered comfort, the frontier night carries risks. You shift slightly, listening for the subtle disturbances that signal an uninvited visitor, human, animal, or otherwise. Improvised alarm systems were a cornerstone of riders' survival. A strategically placed tin can, a taut string across the camp, or a slight rustle of branches could alert you to intrusions. Historians still argue whether these measures were widespread or anecdotal, but every source agrees on the necessity of vigilance. You tug a small cord attached to a tin, listening to the faint jingle that will serve as your early warning. Fringe accounts suggest some riders relied on even stranger methods: small bundles of thorns arranged in patterns, tiny bells sewn into the bedroll, or whispered charms recited aloud. You can't help but smirk at the eccentricity, yet there's wisdom hidden in ritual. The act of preparing for potential threats trains the mind to remain alert while the body relaxes, a paradoxical balance that the frontier demanded. You glance at the horse, whose ears flick in response to distant sounds, and feel reassured. You adjust the lantern, ensuring its flicker doesn't give away your position to curious wildlife, while still illuminating the immediate perimeter. The shadows dance over the protective layers of your bedroll, exaggerating textures and folds. Fringe sources describe riders laying small twigs or stones around the camp to amplify noise from movement, a primitive tripwire of sorts. Historians debate the practical effectiveness of such methods, but the act itself reinforces a sense of control over a wild, unpredictable environment. The night hums with subtle sounds, the soft scuff of hooves, distant howls, and the occasional creak of timber. You tuck the bedroll edges tighter, creating both a sensory buffer and a physical shield. The herbs release a faint scent, which fringe sources suggest may have helped mask human odors from predators. Whether this worked consistently is uncertain, but the layered approach, scent, sound, and positioning, creates a multifaceted defensive strategy. A minor quip surfaces. Apparently, I'm now a scented ninja in wool armor. You chuckle softly, careful not to disrupt the delicate quiet. You run a hand along the improvised alarms, ensuring that strings, cans, and small clanging objects are correctly positioned. Each adjustment is deliberate, not too tight to break under minor disturbances, not too loose to fail in alerting you. Fringe sources also mention riders placing small notches in nearby logs to detect movement or vibrations, a tactile early warning system historians still debate. You test the tension, hearing the faint twang of a string, and nod in satisfaction. The horse shifts slightly, a living companion contributing both warmth and vigilance. Riders often relied on the animal's acute senses as part of their alarm system. You notice its ears swiveling towards subtle sounds, the soft intake of breath alerting you before any danger approaches. Fringe anecdotes describe whispering to the horse to maintain calm while still encouraging vigilance. You murmur a few soft phrases, enjoying the absurd but comforting dialogue. You glance around the camp, appreciating how each protective element, the layered bedroll, the lantern, the improvised alarms, and the horse, works in concert. A minor quip drifts through your mind. Apparently, I'm now a scented ninja in wool armor. You chuckle softly, careful not to disrupt the delicate quiet.
Dawn approaches, and the first pale light stretches across frost-tipped grass. You shift in your bedroll, already planning the delicate dance of early morning departure. Frontier riders perfected the art of leaving camp without disturbing the cozy layers they had built, or alerting wildlife or nearby humans to their presence. Historians still argue whether certain folding techniques were widely taught or remained private hacks, but your body remembers the motions. Fold, tuck, roll, strap, repeat. Each movement is deliberate, almost meditative, a ritual honed over countless miles. You begin with the bedroll itself, carefully unfastening the straps and loosening knots. Fringe sources describe riders using subtle pivots and sliding motions to avoid creating noise. Tiny creaks could travel far in frost-hardened terrain. You mimic these movements, aware of the soft shuffle of your horse nearby, which shifts its weight almost in sync with you. A minor quip crosses your mind. I'm basically conducting a symphony of stealthy folds. Humor helps, as always, to keep the mind light while the fingers work. Next comes the placement of smaller items: herbs, journal, gloves, and knife. Each goes back into its pocket or pouch with precision. Some riders reportedly developed personal mnemonics to ensure nothing was left behind, tiny chants or rhymes whispered under breath. Historians debate the prevalence of such systems, but the logic is undeniable. Forgetting even a single item could compromise the day's ride. You tuck the last herb pouch into a snug fold, feeling satisfaction at its precise placement. The horse receives its portion of the morning attention. You tighten the saddle, check the straps, and ensure that your carefully packed bedroll balances securely behind it. Fringe accounts suggest some riders even shifted their packs slightly forward or backward to even out heat distribution or maintain comfort during long rides, though historians question the necessity. You follow the principle anyway, adjusting the roll with a small tug and patting it into place. Breakfast may be skipped or delayed, but a final small ritual remains. A glance at the campsite, a quiet nod to the tiny alarms, the layered blankets, and the horse that carried you through the night. Fringe stories describe riders whispering thanks to the elements, wind, frost, or forest, though historians remain divided on whether these were symbolic or personal practices. You offer a soft nod, feeling the faint weight of gratitude, and slide into the saddle. As you mount, the bedroll settles into place with the horse's motion, almost magically. You swing your leg over, feeling the familiar thump and sway, and sense that every fold, tuck, and layer has served its purpose. A minor joke drifts through your mind. I leave behind a perfectly layered crime scene of frost and herbs. The humor eases tension, and your eyes scan the trail ahead. The rhythm of riding resumes. Gentle clop of hooves, the sway of the saddle, and the soft whistle of wind over frost. You feel prepared, alert, and subtly warmed by the ingenuity of your nocturnal rituals. Fringe sources even note that some riders would whisper a final line to their mail pouches, a kind of silent blessing for the journey ahead. Historians still debate whether this was common practice, but you murmur a soft good luck anyway. Finally, you settle into the ride, muscles flexed and senses alive. Every early morning adjustment, every careful fold, every ritual performed the night before pays dividends. You glance briefly at your bedroll behind you, marveling at the efficiency, and move into the morning light, confident that you've mastered the subtle art of departing a camp quietly, warmly, and completely prepared.
The route stretches ahead, pale sunlight filtering through frost-laden trees. You feel the familiar mix of fatigue and quiet satisfaction from a night spent mastering bedroll, lantern, herbs, and horse. The end-of-route rituals are subtle yet essential, cleaning gear, reorganizing supplies, and savoring the small victories of surviving a cold, lonely night. Fringe sources describe riders carefully inspecting each layer of wool and leather for wear or frost damage, a practice historians still debate in terms of universality. You pause for a moment, brushing frost from your gloves, and smile at the tiny triumph of preparedness. Your horse shifts beneath you, nudging the tightly packed bedroll, a silent reminder that the animal's comfort mattered as much as your own. Some riders reportedly whispered thanks to their horses during these final tasks, a quiet acknowledgement of mutual reliance. Whether ritual or practicality, the act reinforces the partnership that kept both rider and mail safe across the frontier. You run a hand along the leather, noting tiny scratches and wear patterns, a diary of past miles, and adjust straps for the final leg. Packing up lanterns, you shake off soot and residual wax, placing them carefully back in protective pouches. Fringe accounts suggest some riders added small charms or symbols to lantern casings before the journey's end, claiming this enhanced luck or light stability. Historians remain divided on the prevalence of such practices, but you indulge the ritual, a tiny smile at the notion that even minor superstitions could feel like an advantage in a wild landscape. Next comes the careful inspection of your bedroll. Every fold is smoothed, every layer checked, every herb pouch adjusted. You notice the faint aromatic blend lingering in the air, sage, lavender, and the ever-present hint of charcoal, and inhale deeply, enjoying the sensory reward for your effort. Fringe sources describe riders occasionally leaving tiny notes tucked in folds, reminders for the next night or messages for fellow travelers, though historians debate the scope of this practice. You tuck in one final leaf of sage, a symbolic nod to preparation and continuity. You glance around the campsite, taking in the subtle details: trampled frost near the fire,
the residual warmth of your horse's body, the faint shadows cast by the morning sun. Minor jokes flit through your mind. I leave behind an herbal monument to frontier ingenuity. But beneath the humor is profound satisfaction. Every tweak, every precaution, every tiny eccentricity contributed to a safe night, demonstrating the quiet genius of rider routines. Finally, you mount your horse for the last stretch. The bedroll rests snug behind, the mail pouches secure, and the lantern tucked safely. You take one last moment to appreciate the layered comfort, the subtle heat, and the small rituals that transformed a freezing, lonely night into series of manageable steps. Historians still debate how much superstition influenced morale versus practical necessity, but for you, it's clear. Preparation, observation, and a touch of ingenuity made all the difference. The route ahead feels lighter because of the rituals behind you. Each minor adjustment, the precise folds, the layered herbs, the horse-harnessed warmth, the improvised alarms, culminates in a rhythm that carries you forward. You glance at your surroundings, inhale the crisp morning air, and sense a quiet pride in the mastery of small, meaningful routines. The frontier may be harsh, unpredictable, and at times absurd, but with your nightly rituals complete, you are ready, steady, and surprisingly comfortable. Now, let your body sink fully into the memory of those carefully layered nights. Imagine the soft folds of wool and hides embracing you, the faint scent of sage and lavender mingling with crisp forest air. Each layer is a gentle barrier against the cold, a protective rhythm honed over centuries, allowing both mind and body to relax. The horse stands quietly nearby, a steadfast companion, radiating warmth that seeps into the earth and your muscles alike. Even the small rituals, the whispered thanks, the tucked herbs, the precise folds, create a comforting cadence, a slow heartbeat in the otherwise wild and unpredictable frontier night. Breathe in that cool, aromatic air and feel the residual heat from lanterns and embers lingering softly around you. The wind outside whispers through branches, but inside your mental cocoon, the chill seems distant, a subtle reminder of how deliberate care can shape comfort. Let the gentle flicker of imagined flames cast soft, dancing shadows across your awareness, bringing a sense of serenity to your thoughts. Remember, the frontier was never just about survival. It was a series of small, mindful victories. The scent of herbs, the warmth of layered hides, the steady presence of a horse, and the quiet rituals of preparation all coalesce into a calm, meditative experience. Even in the coldest, loneliest moments, there was order, there was warmth, and there was quiet triumph. Let this layered memory settle into your mind as you exhale, softening every muscle, releasing tension, and allowing sleep to drift over you like the first light of dawn over frost-covered fields. Now, as your eyes close and the world fades, carry the gentle rhythm of frontier nights with you, a comforting hum of warmth, light, and preparation. Peace settles in, soft and steady, wrapping you in the quiet wisdom of those long, cold nights.